For more than 2 years, my daughter-in-law kept telling me that my son was abroad for work, living the high life in Dubai, while I was here in the city scraping pennies together. She would send me photos of skyscrapers and desert safaris, always with an excuse for why he could never jump on a video call. Then one freezing morning at the market, a delivery driver with a neck tattoo suddenly handed me a package wrapped in duct tape. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're Nash's father. It's yours now. Only open it when you're alone." What was inside that package made my blood boil and my heart stop. It was the brutal, undeniable proof that my son had never left the country. Before I tell you what I found and how I started a war against the woman who destroyed my family, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Have you ever trusted your life to someone only to discover they were the one holding the knife? My name is Harrison. I'm 72 years old, born and raised in the grid of the city. I spent 40 years working on the docks, 20 of them as a union foreman. I know how to read people. I know when a cargo load is light, and I know when a man is lying to my face. Or at least, I thought I did. But love blinds you, especially when it's love for your only son. That Tuesday morning started like any other Tuesday over the last 2 years. I was at the Central Market, but I wasn't there for the roast pork sandwiches or the donuts that used to be my weekly treat. I was there for the discount produce bin and the day-old bread. The bitter winter wind whipped through the open doors of the market, freezing me to the bone. But I pulled my old coat tighter. I needed to save every dollar. I picked up a pack of chicken breasts that were a day away from expiring. They were 30% off. I did the math in my head. If I skipped coffee for the next week and ate this chicken with rice, I could send an extra $100 to Monica by Friday. Supposedly, my son Nash was dealing with a cash flow problem in Dubai. Monica, his wife, had told me international transfers were frozen because of some bureaucratic nonsense with his construction project. She said he needed liquid cash to pay his crew, or he might lose the contract. I was a foreman. I knew you never leave your crew unpaid. So I lived on beans and discount chicken, driving an old truck that had more rust than paint, just to make sure my boy succeeded. I paid for the chicken with exact change, ignoring the beating look from the cashier who used to know me back when I bought the best cuts of meat. I walked toward the parking lot, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The sky was that flat steel gray that promises snow. I was digging for my keys when a beat-up delivery van slammed on its brakes right behind my truck, blocking me in. My old instincts kicked in. I dropped my grocery bag and shoved my hand into my coat pocket, gripping the can of pepper spray I started carrying last year. The side door of the van slid open, and a man stepped out. He wasn't your regular mail carrier. He was skinny, wearing a leather jacket that had seen better days, and a spiderweb tattoo crept up the side of his neck. He looked like the kind of guy I used to throw off the docks for stealing copper wire. I braced myself, ready for a fight, but he didn't attack. He looked around nervously, his eyes darting toward the security cameras on the light poles. "Harrison," he asked, his voice harsh like a gravel in a blender. "Who's asking?" I barked back, keeping my hand on the spray. "My name is Sal. I have something for you. From Nash." My heart skipped a beat. Nash. My son was thousands of miles away. Why would this guy have something from Nash? Sal reached into the van and pulled out a shoebox. It wasn't a professional package. It was wrapped in layers of black duct tape, looking like something you'd find in a police evidence locker. He shoved it against my chest. "He told me if he didn't come back in a month to give this to you," Sal said, looking over his shoulder again. "It's been 2 years, old man. I tried to find him, but I can't get near that place anymore." "What place? What are you talking about?" "Nash is in Dubai," I said, confusion fighting the adrenaline in my veins. Sal let out a short, humorless laugh. It sounded like a bark. "Dubai? Yeah, right. Just open the box, Harrison, but don't do it in front of your daughter-in-law. Don't let her see this." Before I could ask another question, Sal jumped back into his van. The tires screeched against the asphalt and he vanished into the city traffic, leaving me standing in the cold with a taped-up shoebox and a sense of dread settling in my stomach like a block of ice. I unlocked my truck and climbed in. The cab was freezing, the vinyl seats stiff from the cold. I tossed the groceries onto the passenger seat and set the box on my lap. My hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the temperature. I used my house key to slice through the thick layers of duct tape. My mind was racing. Was it drugs? Was Nash in trouble with the law? Was it cash he had smuggled? I ripped the lid off. There was no money and no gold. Resting on a pile of crumpled napkins was a passport. A dark blue United States passport. I lifted it with my numb fingers. It belonged to Nash. I flipped it open, frantically turning the pages. It was empty. No stamps. No entry visa for the United Arab Emirates. No exit stamp from the international airport. According to this document, my son, who supposedly had been building a luxury hotel in Dubai for 24 months, texting me about the heat and the sandstorms, had never left the United States. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the truck. If he wasn't in Dubai, where was he? I dug deeper into the box. Beneath the passport was a smartphone. The screen was shattered. A spiderweb of cracks obscured the black glass. It looked like it had been smashed against a wall or stomped on. I pressed the power button. Nothing. It was dead. And then I saw the third item. It was wrapped in a small piece of tissue paper at the bottom of the box. I unfolded the paper. It was a tooth. Not just any tooth. A molar. A molar with a distinctive gold crown. I stared at it, and the memory from 20 years ago hit me with the force of a physical blow. Nash was 18, playing hockey. He had taken a puck to the jaw. I remembered the dentist bill. I remember telling him to get the gold crown because it was stronger, because the men in our family are built to last. I paid $1,200 for that crown. It was my son's tooth, and at the root, the broken, jagged root there, was dried brown blood. This hadn't fallen out naturally. This had been beaten out of him. A scream formed in my throat. A primal roar of a father realizing his cub is hurt, but it died before it could escape. My phone rang. The shrill ringtone shattered the silence of the truck cab. I looked at the screen. The caller ID showed a picture of a smiling woman with perfect blonde hair and expensive teeth. Monica, my daughter-in-law. The woman who lived in the upscale suburban mansion that I helped pay for. The woman who told me every week how happy Nash was in the Middle East. I looked at the tooth in my hand, then at the ringing phone. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I was a foreman. I knew how to handle a crisis. You don't panic. You assess. I answered the phone. Hello, Monica, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. Dad, thank God you answered. Monica's voice came through the speakers, breathless and frantic. She was acting. I could hear it now. I could hear the fake tremor she used every time she needed something. What's wrong? I asked, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. It's Nash. He just managed to send me a satellite message. The signal is terrible, but he's in trouble, Dad. Trouble? I repeated. I looked down at the passport on my lap. The passport that proved he wasn't where she said he was. Yes, there's an issue with the customs agents in Dubai. They're holding his equipment. They're threatening to detain him if he doesn't pay a release fee immediately. They took his passport. Dad, they have his passport! I closed my eyes. The lie was so smooth, so detailed. She said they took his passport, but his passport was right here sitting on my knees in a freezing truck. How much? I asked. I needed to see how far she would go. $15,000, she said quickly. Too quickly. It's a bribe, basically, but if we don't wire it to the intermediary account in the next 2 hours, they're going to throw him in a Dubai prison. You know how strict they are over there. I'm draining my accounts, but I'm short. Can you help? Please, Dad. It's for Nash. For 2 years, every time she said, it's for Nash, I opened my wallet. I sold my bonds. I refinanced my truck. I ate expired chicken because I loved him. But now, looking at that bloody tooth, I realized I hadn't been funding my son's success. I had been funding his disappearance. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her I had the passport. I wanted to drive to her mansion and rip the truth out of her. But Sal's warning echoed in my head. Only open it when you're alone. Don't let her see this. If she knew I had the package, she would know the game was up. And if she had done something to Nash that resulted in a bloody tooth, I had no idea what she'd do if she felt cornered. I needed to get close to her. I needed to see her face when she lied to me. I needed to get inside that house. I took a breath, channeling 40 years of negotiations with corrupt contractors and union reps. Okay, Monica, I said, forcing my voice to tremble with the worry of a distressed old man. $15,000. I can move some things around. I have some cash stashed at home. Oh, thank you, Dad. You're saving his life. Can you wire it? No, I said. I don't trust banks with an emergency like this, and I want to see the message he sent. I want to know he's okay. I'll bring a check and some cash to the house. I'll be there in an hour. There was a pause, a slight hesitation. She didn't want me at the house. She never wanted me at the house. Okay, she finally said. Hurry, Dad. Every minute counts. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, the silence of the winter morning pressing in on me. I looked at the bustling market. People buying lunch, laughing, living their normal lives. They had no idea that just a few feet away a man's entire world had just collapsed. Carefully, I placed the passport, the broken phone, and the tooth back into the shoebox. I shoved the box under the passenger seat behind a pile of old rags and jumper cables. Then I started the truck. The engine coughed and sputtered before roaring to life. $15,000. She wanted $15,000 to save a man from a country he wasn't even in. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the parking lot. I wasn't going to the bank. I was going to my place to get my checkbook, and then I was driving to the suburbs. I was walking into the viper's nest. Monica thought she was dealing with a senile, lonely old man who would do anything for a scrap of news about his son. She thought I was an easy mark, a clueless ATM. She forgot where I came from. She forgot that before I was a coupon-clipping retiree, I ran the toughest dock on the East Coast. I had dealt with lying thieves and thugs my whole life. She wanted a check. I'd give her a check. But I was also going to find out where my son really was and who knocked his tooth out. And if Monica had anything to do with it, God help her. Because the cops would be the least of her problems. I emerged onto the highway, my eyes fixed on the road, but my mind was already in that mansion planning my next move. The game had changed. She thought she was playing solitaire, but she had just dealt herself into a poker game with a man who had absolutely nothing left to lose. I checked my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Sal's van, but the road was clear. I was alone. Hold on, Nash, I whispered to the empty cab. Dad's coming. I pulled my rusted truck into the driveway of the suburban house. It was a sprawling colonial estate with manicured hedges and a 3-car garage that looked bigger than the townhome where I grew up. I sat there for a moment, the engine idling rough, staring at the brick facade. I bought this house 3 years ago. I cashed out my pension fund, sold the rental property I'd held on to since the 80s, and handed over a check for $1.2 million. It was supposed to be a nest for Nash and Monica, a place where my grandkids would run around the yard. Now it just looked like a fortress built on lies. I grabbed my checkbook from the glove box and stepped out into the biting wind. The front door opened before I could even ring the bell. Monica stood there framed by the warm golden light of the foyer. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly pension check, and she held a glass of red wine in one hand. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. For a woman whose husband was supposedly being held hostage by corrupt customs agents in the Middle East, she looked remarkably put together. "Dad, you're here," she said, ushering me inside. The air in the house smelled of expensive vanilla candles and something else, something stale beneath the perfume. Thank God. I've been pacing for an hour. She led me into the living room. It was like walking into a showroom. White furniture, glass tables, abstract art on the walls. There wasn't a single personal item in sight. No photos of Nash, no mementos from their wedding. Just cold, expensive perfection. On the coffee table, next to an open bottle of Cabernet, sat her phone. I sat on the edge of the white sofa, keeping my coat on. I felt like an intruder in the house I paid for. "Show me the message, Monica," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I need to know what he said." She sat next to me, way too close. A cloud of wine and perfume enveloping me. She tapped the screen and held it up. It was a WhatsApp conversation. The contact name was Nash Dubai. The message read, "Dad, help. Critical situation. Equipment seized. Dubai is dangerous. Need 15,000 for release or I'm detained. Do not call. Signal monitored. Love you." I stared at the screen. The words were there, but the voice was wrong. Nash didn't talk like that. He didn't say critical situation like he was in a bad action movie. And he never ended a text with "love you." He always said "love Nash" or "talk soon." It felt mechanical. It felt fake. But I nodded, playing the part of the terrified father. "When was this sent?" I asked. 40 minutes ago, Monica said, taking a long sip of wine. He's terrified, Dad, she said. If we don't wire the funds to the handler immediately, they're taking him to a holding cell. Do you know what happens in those places? We might never see him again. She squeezed my hand. Her palm was clammy and cold. I reached for my checkbook, but then I paused. I winced and pressed a hand on my stomach. Monica, I'm sorry. The stress, my stomach is in knots. Can I use the restroom before we handle the paperwork? Of course, Dad. Do you know where it is? Down the hall past the study. I stood up, walking slowly, shuffling my feet like the old man she thought I was. I went down the hall, but I didn't go to the bathroom. I waited until I heard the clink of the wine bottle against the glass in the living room, making sure she was distracted. I slipped into the utility closet next to the kitchen. It was a cramped space, smelling of cleaning supplies and dust. I pulled the chain for the overhead bulb. I spent 20 years as a foreman, but before that, I was an electrician's apprentice. I knew how houses breathed. I knew where the wires went. I looked at the main communications panel on the wall. It was a mess of fiber optic cables and Ethernet lines. The main router was blinking furiously. The activity lights were flashing rapid solid green. That meant a massive amount of data was being uploaded. I traced the yellow cables. One went to the living room, one went to the master bedroom upstairs. But the third cable, the one with the fastest blinking light, ran straight down through the floorboards. It went to the basement. I frowned. Last Thanksgiving, Monica told me the basement had flooded from a burst pipe and was off limits due to mold remediation. She said it was a construction zone stripped to the studs. Why would a flooded, empty basement need a high-speed hardline connection that was currently uploading gigabytes of data? I turned off the light and stepped back into the hallway. My heart was hammering against my ribs. She was lying about the basement. What was down there? I checked my watch. I'd been gone 2 minutes. I needed more. I moved silently toward the door of Nash's home office. It was ajar. I pushed it open and slipped inside. The room was cold. A layer of dust coated the mahogany desk. Nash was a software engineer. He lived on his computer. But his desktop monitor was dark, unplugged. The chair was pushed in, looking like no one had sat in it for months. I pulled open the top desk drawer. Empty. Just a few paper clips and a stapler. I looked around the room. Monica was meticulous, obsessed with appearances. She wouldn't leave a mess, but everyone has a hiding spot. I spotted a tall dresser in the corner, usually used for storing linens, but one drawer was slightly misaligned. I walked over and pulled it open. It was full of Monica's things. Silk scarves, boxes of hosiery intimates. It was a strange place to keep clothes in a home office. I reached beneath the layers of silk. My fingers brushed against paper. I pulled out a stack of envelopes held together with a rubber band. They weren't addressed to Monica. They were addressed to Nash. I flipped through them. Chase Bank final notice. American Express past due. Citibank collections department. There were dozens of them unopened, hidden in a lingerie drawer. If Nash was working a multi-million-dollar contract in Dubai, why were his personal credit cards going into default? Why was Monica hiding his mail instead of paying the bills with the money I'd been sending? And then I saw it. The letter at the bottom of the stack was already open. It was a printed digital invoice from an email account addressed to Monica from Sunnyvale Care Center. Subject: monthly payment received. Patient 304. Sunnyvale. The name hit me like a physical blow. Sunnyvale wasn't a hospital. It was a warehouse for the dying. It was a rundown state asylum on the outskirts of the city. The kind of place where patients were drugged to keep them quiet, and the hallways smelled of urine and bleach. I had toured it 5 years ago when my wife got sick, and I walked out after 10 minutes because I wouldn't let a dog die in there, let alone the woman I loved. Why was Monica paying Sunnyvale $4,500 a month? And who was patient 304? A floorboard creaked out in the hallway. "Dad!" Monica's voice called out, sharp and suspicious. "Are you okay in there?" I shoved the letters back under the silk scarves and slammed the drawer shut. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. The passport in my truck said Nash was here. The tooth said he was hurt. And this invoice said someone was being kept in a nightmare facility using my money. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I called back, injecting my voice with fake embarrassment. "Just old plumbing, you know." I hurried out of the office and went back to the bathroom, flushing the toilet for effect before washing my hands. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide. I splashed cold water on my skin. Get a grip, Harrison. If she suspects you know, you'll never find him. I walked back into the living room. Monica was standing by the fireplace with her arms crossed, tapping her foot. Everything okay? She asked, her eyes scanning my face. Just getting old, Monica, I said with a tired smile. It's not dignified. I sat back down at the coffee table and opened my checkbook. I pulled out a pen. 15,000, you said? Yes, she said, her posture instantly relaxing at the sight of the pen touching the paper. That should cover the fees and the transfer costs. I wrote the date. I wrote her name. I wrote $15,000 and 0 cents. My hand hovered over the signature line. If I gave her this money, she would use it to keep hurting my son. If I refused, she'd know I was onto her. I signed my name, Harrison. But on the last loop of the letter, I intentionally jerked the pen, creating a jagged, unrecognizable scribble that didn't match my bank card. It looked like a mistake, the tremors of an old man's hand, but I knew my bank. They were strict. They would flag a check this size with a mismatched signature immediately. They would call me to verify, and when they did, the check would bounce. It would buy me 24 hours. I ripped the check out and handed it to her. Here you go, I said. Save him. Monica snatched the check from my fingers like a starving seagull. She looked at the numbers, her eyes gleaming with greed. She didn't even glance at the signature. Thank you, Dad, she sighed, folding the check and slipping it into her robe pocket. I'll go to the bank first thing in the morning. You have no idea what this means. Oh, I think I do, I thought. I stood up, buttoning my coat. I should get going. I want to be home in case he calls. Yes, you should rest, she said, practically pushing me toward the door. She had what she wanted. I was no longer useful. She walked me to the front door. The wind had picked up, howling through the estate's trees. Drive safe, Dad, she said, and shut the heavy oak door before I even made it down the steps. I walked to my truck, the cold air biting my face. I climbed in, but I didn't start the engine. I sat there in the dark, watching the house. Through the sheer curtains of the living room window, I saw Monica. She wasn't calling Dubai. She wasn't crying. She was pouring herself another glass of wine and dancing. She was actually dancing, twirling across the room with the check in her hand. I gripped the steering wheel, rage burning in my chest. Then the headlights of a car swept across the driveway. I ducked down, sinking into the seat so only my eyes were above the dashboard. A black Range Rover pulled into the driveway, bypassing the garage and heading down the side of the house toward the kitchen entrance. It was brand new. It still had the dealer plates. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing dark medical scrubs and a heavy parka. He moved with a familiarity that turned my stomach. He didn't knock. He used the key to open the back door. The kitchen lights peeled out for a second, illuminating his face. I froze. I knew that face. It had been 2 years, but you don't forget the face of a man who treated your dying wife like a piece of meat. It was the head nurse from Sunnyvale, the one with the dead eyes, who had told me that if I wanted extra pillows for my wife, I'd have to pay a premium fee. What was the head nurse of a low-income asylum doing walking into my son's mansion with a key at 8 p.m.? And why was he driving a Range Rover that cost more than he made in 5 years? I watched the door close behind him. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was a horror show. The passport, the tooth, the basement internet connection, the Sunnyvale invoice, and now the nurse. My son wasn't in Dubai. He never was. He was patient 304, and these monsters were feeding on him like vultures. I started the truck, keeping the headlights off until I rolled out of the driveway and down the street. My hands were steady now. The shock was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard resolve of a man going to war. I needed help. I couldn't storm a facility like Sunnyvale alone, and I certainly couldn't take on Monica and her accomplice without backup. I needed someone who knew the underworld, someone who hated the system as much as I did. I reached under the passenger seat and pulled out the shoebox. I grabbed the scrap of paper Sal had tucked inside the passport. It had a phone number scribbled in pencil. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. Yeah? Sal's voice rasped. It's Harrison, I said. I opened the box. Silence on the other end. Then a heavy sigh. And I need a job done, Sal. I know where they're keeping him. I heard the flick of a lighter and the inhale of a cigarette. I'm listening, old man. Meet me at the diner on 4th Street in an hour, I said. Bring your tools. I hung up and drove into the night. The city skyline glowed in the distance, but I didn't see the city. I only saw the basement of an asylum and the vengeance that was coming for the people who put my son there. I drove back to my apartment on the south side of the city, the truck rattling over every pothole. It wasn't really an apartment. It was a glorified closet above a pawn shop that smelled of old dust and desperate decisions. The radiator hissed and banged, fighting a losing battle against the draft coming through the window frame I had tried to seal with newspaper. I threw the deadbolt behind me, tossed my coat on the only chair, and sat on the edge of the mattress that had a permanent sag in the middle. I pulled the shoebox out from under my coat. My hands were still steady, that foreman's calm masking the storm inside. But when I touched the shattered phone, I felt a tremor. This device was the black box of my son's crash. It contained the last moments of his freedom, the truth of his disappearance. I needed to get into it. I dug through my junk drawer, pushing aside old batteries and rubber bands until I found a charging cable that fit. I plugged it into the wall and connected the phone. For a long minute, nothing happened. The screen remained a black web of cracks. I held my breath, praying that whatever battery was left hadn't corroded over 2 years. Then a faint vibration buzzed against the table. A red battery icon flashed on the screen. It was alive. I waited an hour for it to charge, pacing the small room, the floorboards creaking under my work boots. When the screen finally powered on properly, it asked for a 4-digit passcode. I tried Nash's birthday. Incorrect. I tried the year he graduated. Incorrect. I tried 4 digits of his social security. Incorrect. The phone displayed a warning. Try again in 1 minute. I closed my eyes, trying to think like my son. Not the man Monica had molded him into, but the boy I raised. What mattered to him before the money, before the mansion, before the lies? I typed 4 numbers. 0812. August 12th. His mother's birthday. Lena's birthday. The lock screen clicked open. My chest tightened. Even after all this time, even under her spell, he was still holding on to his mother. I tapped the gallery icon first. I expected to see sand dunes, fancy dinners, the life Monica had been describing in vivid detail for 24 months. There were no pictures of Dubai, no pictures of airports. The camera roll was almost empty except for a few blurry shots of a ceiling. A popcorn ceiling with a bean-shaped water stain. I recognized the texture. It wasn't the smooth drywall of his mansion. It looked like cheap industrial paneling. I scrolled back. The dates on the photo stopped abruptly 2 years ago. Then I saw an app called Call Recorder Pro. It was a hidden app not on the main screen. Nash must have installed it when he started getting suspicious. I opened it. There were hundreds of files. Most were mundane business calls, but the last few, dated just days before he supposedly left for Dubai, were marked with red stars. I tapped the first one. The audio was crisp, recorded from inside a car. "Don't you understand the legal structure?" a man's voice said. He sounded slick, professional, a lawyer. "If he dies, the trust goes to his father until your son turns 21. You get a stipend, but you don't get control." Then Monica's voice, sharp and impatient. "I don't want a stipend, David. I didn't marry him to get an allowance." "What if he doesn't die? What if he just disappears?" "Becomes incapacitated," the lawyer asked. "Right, incapacitated, coma, brain damage, mental collapse. If he's alive but can't speak for himself, who gets power of attorney?" "You do," the lawyer said. "As the spouse, you control medical decisions and assets unless he has a living will stating otherwise. But keeping someone on life support is expensive, Monica." "Money isn't the problem," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "His dad has money. He'll pay anything to keep his precious boy alive. I just need to make sure I'm the one holding the checkbook." The recording ended. I sat there in the silence of my room, the radiator hissing like a snake. She had planned it. She hadn't just snapped. She had sought a legal strategy to turn my son into a vegetable so she could harvest his bank account and mine. I played the next file. It was dated 2 days later. It was just Nash. Heavy breathing. The sound of fabric rustling. He was whispering, terrified. "Dad! Dad, answer the phone! Why won't you answer?" There was a pause. then a sob. She blocked you. She put a block on my outgoing calls. I can't feel my legs. I ate the soup she made, and now I can't feel my legs. A crash like a lamp falling over. Monica yelled, "Nash!" It was a raw, jagged sound that ripped my heart apart. "What did you put in the food?" Then the door opening. The recording caught the sound of heavy footsteps. Not Monica's heels. Heavy boots. Men. "Relax, sir," a deep voice said. "We're here to help you rest." "Get away from me," Nash screamed. "Don't touch me, Dad, Dad." The audio cut out with a sharp crunch, like the phone had been stomped on. I set the phone down on the mattress, put my head in my hands, and wept. I wept for the terror my son felt in his own home. I wept because while he was screaming for me, I was probably asleep in my bed, thinking he was packing for a business trip. I had failed him. I had let the wolf into the house, and she had devoured him while I watched. But tears don't solve problems. Rage does. And the rage feeling me now was cold and focused. I wiped my face. I needed to follow the money. Monica said she needed $15,000 for fees. Over the last 2 years, I had sent her almost $100,000. My retirement, my savings, my life's work. Where did it go? I grabbed my coat and the phone. I needed to go to the bank. The sun was just coming up when I parked in front of the bank on Main Street. It was a local branch, the kind where they still knew your name, or at least they used to. Nash and I had opened a joint account there when he was 18 for his college tuition. We never closed it. I had signing authority. I walked into the security guard nodding at me. I went straight to the branch manager's desk, Mrs. Davis. She'd been there for 30 years. "Harrison," she said, looking surprised. "I haven't seen you in months. How are you?" "I'm fine, Martha," I lied. "I need to check the transaction history on the joint account ending in 4490. I need to see where the transfers from my personal account have been landing." She frowned. "You usually just make deposits. Is something wrong?" "Just checking the books," I said. She typed on her keyboard, the clicking sound echoing in the quiet lobby. She squinted at the screen. "Harrison, these transfers are substantial. Did you authorize this?" "Yes," I said. "To Nash for his business in Dubai." She turned the monitor so I could see it. There were no transfers to Dubai. There were no transfers to a business account. The money I had wired, every single cent, had been routed through the joint account and immediately sent to 2 domestic recipients. The first was a luxury auto dealership. $2,000 in payments over 2 years. That explained the Range Rover in the driveway. I had bought that car. My sweat, my overtime, my skipped meals had paid for the car the head nurse was driving to my son's house. The second recipient was Sunnyvale Care Center. Recurring monthly payments of $4,500. The memo line on the transfers read, Unit 304 Maintenance. It was the final nail in the coffin. The digital trail didn't lie. My son wasn't building skyscrapers. He was Unit 304, and I was paying for his imprisonment. "Print it," I said. "Print everything." Mrs. Davis looked at me, her face pale. "Harrison, this looks like fraud. If Nash didn't authorize this." "Just print it, Martha, please." She hit a key. The printer whirred to life. I watched the pages slide out, a physical manifest of my stupidity and Monica's cruelty. I reached out to grab them, but before I could touch the paper, Mrs. Davis's screen flashed red. A loud, jarring beep came from her computer. She froze. Her hand hovered over the papers. "What is it?" I asked. She looked up at me, and the warmth was gone from her eyes. It was replaced by a cautious, professional stare. "Harrison, I can't give these to you." "Why not? It's my account." "Not anymore," she said softly, her voice trembling. An alert just popped up. A court order. "Court order? From who?" "Family court," she said, reading from the screen. "It was filed at 9 a.m. today, just a few minutes ago. An emergency petition for temporary guardianship." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Guardianship of who?" "Of you, Harrison." "Me?" "The petitioner is Monica," she said. "She's alleging that you suffer from advanced dementia and financial incompetence. She claims you've been making erratic, high-value transfers to foreign scammers, and that you became violent and confused at her house last night." She struck first. I remembered the check, the jagged signature. I thought I was being clever buying time, but I had given her exactly what she needed. Proof of my decline. She used the bounced check, my appearance at her house, my shabby clothes, all of it against me. The account is frozen, Harrison, Mrs. Davies said, pulling the papers back. I can't give you access to the funds or the records until the hearing. You need to leave. But those records prove she's lying, I shouted, slamming my hand on the desk. People turned to look. The security guard stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. Mrs. Davies looked scared now. Harrison, please don't make a scene. The note here says, it says if you show up at the bank, we are to notify the authorities for your own safety. She was going to call the cops. She was going to have me committed. I looked at the printer, the evidence just out of reach. I looked at the security guard, a young kid who didn't know me from Adam. If I stayed, I'd be in a psych ward by noon, sedated and silenced, just like Nash. I backed away. I'm leaving, I said, holding up my hands. I'm leaving. I turned and walked out of the bank, forcing myself not to run. I stepped onto the sidewalk, the cold air hitting my sweaty face. My phone vibrated. A text message. It was from Monica. Dad, the bank called about the check. It seems you're having one of your episodes again. Don't worry. I've taken steps to make sure you're safe. The police are looking for you to take you to a nice facility where you can rest. Stay right where you are. I stared at the screen. Checkmate. I had no money. My accounts were frozen. The police were hunting me like a senile old man, and the only proof I had was locked in a bank that was now a fortress against me. I was broke, I was hunted, and I was alone. But as I looked down at my worn-out work boots, I remembered something. I wasn't just a pensioner. I was a man who used to fix problems that couldn't be fixed. I didn't need a bank account. I needed leverage. I tossed the phone into the nearest trash can. It was a tracking device now. I pulled my coat collar up and disappeared into the crowd. I had to find Sal. He was a criminal, a lowlife, a guy I wouldn't have let shine my shoes yesterday. Today he was my only hope. I started walking toward the south side of the city. It was a long walk and I didn't have cab fare, but I had rage, and rage is a hell of a fuel. I walked south down the main avenue, collar up against the wind, hands buried deep in my pockets. I had no money, no car, and the cops were hunting me like a fugitive. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt awake. The cold air beat my face, sharpening my senses. I was no longer Harrison the retiree. I was Harrison the foreman, the man who used to break picket lines and negotiate with mobsters over dock cargo. I had a mission, and I needed a soldier. I found a bar tucked away in a narrow alley on the south side. The kind of place that didn't have a sign, just a neon logo flickering in a grime-stained window. It was called the Iron Horse, a dive where ex-cons and stevedores went to drink away their parole violations. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale hops and wet wool. I scanned the room. Sal was sitting in a booth at the back, nursing a bottle of beer and picking at the label. He looked up as I approached, narrowing his eyes. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked resigned. You opened the box, Sal said without offering me a seat. I sat down anyway. The vinyl booth was cracked and sticky. I opened it, I said. I saw the tooth. I saw the passport. Now I need to know the rest. Sal took a long pull from his beer. He leaned forward, the spiderweb tattoo on his neck stretching. Look, Harrison. I gave you the box because I owed Nash, but I'm not looking to get involved in a domestic dispute. Your daughter-in-law is dangerous. She's got friends in low places. Why did you have his things? I asked, ignoring his warning. Why did Nash trust you? Sal looked down at his hands. They were scarred, the knuckles rough. Nash wasn't like the other rich kids, Sal said quietly. I met him 5 years ago. I was doing a stint in juvie for Grand Theft Auto. Nash came in as a volunteer. He was teaching a coding class. Everyone else looked at us like we were animals. Nash looked at us like we were just kids who made a mistake. He taught me Python. He taught me how to build a website. He told me I was smart. Sal's voice cracked slightly. When I got out, nobody would hire me. I got a record. Nash hired me off the books to run deliveries for his side projects. He gave me a shot when my own family wouldn't. That's why I kept the box. That's why I waited. Then tell me what happened, I said. tell me about the night he disappeared. Sal looked around the bar to make sure no one was listening. He dropped his voice to a whisper. It was 2 years ago. I was dropping off some hardware at his place. It was late, maybe 2 a.m. I saw a van pull up. No headlights on. It backed right up to the garage doors. What kind of van? White, no plates. But on the side door, there was a magnetic logo. It was peeling off, but I saw it. Sunnyvale Care Center. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the draft in the bar. Sunnyvale. The same name on the invoice. 2 guys got out, Sal continued. Big guys. Looked like orderlies, but moved like security guards. They went inside. 5 minutes later, they came out carrying a stretcher. Nash was on it. He was strapped down. He wasn't moving. Was he conscious? Sal shook his head. No. His head was lolling to the side. I saw a bandage on his neck like he'd been injected with something. Monica was standing in the doorway, watching. She was holding a glass of wine. Harrison. She just watched them load her husband into the back of a van like a bag of garbage. Then she handed the driver an envelope. I slammed my fist on the table. The beer bottle jumped. Why didn't you call the cops? And say what? Sal shot back. An ex-con saw a rich lady send her husband to rehab. That's what she would have said. That's what she told everyone, that he went to Dubai for work. Who are they gonna believe? Me or the suburban princess? I followed the van, Harrison. I trailed it for 20 miles. They went straight to Sunnyvale. Took him around back to the delivery entrance. That place is a fortress. Cameras everywhere. Keypad locks. I couldn't get in. I leaned back, the rage settling into a cold, hard resolve. Nash was there. He was alive, trapped in a basement, drugged out of his mind while his wife spent his money and I ate expired food. We're breaking him out, I said. Tonight. Sal looked at me like I was insane. We, old man, you can barely walk without wincing. That place has security. They have staff. You think we can just stroll in and wheel him out? We're not asking for him, I said. We're breaking him out. But I need tools. I need bolt cutters. I need a crowbar. I need a vehicle that isn't my truck because she knows my plates. And I need someone who knows how to bypass an electronic lock. Sal hesitated, looking at the door, then back at me. I can bypass the lock, he said. Learned more than just coding in lockup. But I'm broke, Harrison. I pawned my tools last week to make rent, and renting a van takes a credit card and a deposit. I reached into my pocket, and my wallet was empty. My bank accounts were frozen. I had nothing. Except for one thing. I rolled up the sleeve of my flannel shirt and unclasped my watch. It was a vintage 1980 Rolex Submariner. My wife Lena had saved for 3 years to buy it for me on our 40th anniversary. It was the only valuable thing I owned. It was the only piece of her I had left that I could touch. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of the gold and steel. I ran my thumb over the crystal face. Where's the nearest pawn shop? I asked, my voice thick. Sal stared at the watch, his eyes widening. Harrison, that's worth real money. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. It's just metal. My son is flesh and blood. We walked 3 blocks to a pawn shop with bars on the windows and a clerk who looked like he hated the world. I placed the watch on the counter. I need cash, I said. Fast. The clerk picked it up, unscrewed the back with a jeweler's tool and inspected the movement. He hummed, impressed despite himself. Authentic, he grunted. Box and papers? No, I said. Just the watch. $2,000, he said. It's worth 10, I argued, though my heart wasn't in it. I didn't have time to haggle. $2,000 is the offer. Take it or leave it. I took it. I watched as he counted out $2,000 bills. It felt like I was selling my memories, trading my past for a shot at my son's future. I grabbed the cash and shoved it in my pocket. Let's go shopping, I told Sal. We went to a hardware store. I bought a pair of 3-foot bolt cutters, a heavy-duty crowbar, 2 flashlights, duct tape, and zip ties. I bought dark coveralls for both of us and ski masks. Then we went to a moving van rental lot. I paid cash for a cargo van, putting down a hefty deposit to bypass a credit check. By the time we loaded the gear into the back of the white van, the sun had set. The city was dark street lights flickering to life. We sat in the front seat, the smell of new plastic and stale cigarettes filling the cab. I pulled out a cheap burner phone I'd bought at the convenience store next to the pawn shop. I needed to know what Monica was doing. I needed to know if she was at the house or making moves. I dialed my home landline. I knew she wouldn't be there, but maybe she had call forwarding set up. It rang twice. "Hello, Harrison," a voice purred. I froze. It was Monica. She had answered instantly. She wasn't at my house. The call had been forwarded to her cell. "Can you stop hiding, Dad?" she said, her voice dripping with venom. The act was gone. The sweet, concerned daughter-in-law had vanished, replaced by something cold and reptilian. "Where is my son?" I demanded. "The bank called me about the check, Harrison. They told me about your little signature stunt. Clever, but stupid. I tried to deposit it, and when they flagged it, I told them you were confused. I told them you were off your meds. They believed me." I gripped the phone tight. "You faked everything. You stole his life and you're stealing my time," I spat. "Listen to me, old man. The police have a warrant out for you. You're a danger to yourself and others. They're going to find you, and they're going to put you in a state facility where the walls are padded. I'm coming for him, Monica. If you come anywhere near me or that facility, Nash pays the price," she said. Her voice dropped an octave. "He's very thirsty, Harrison. He's on a strict hydration schedule. It would be a shame if the staff forgot to give him water for a few days. Kidneys fail so fast in that condition." "Monster," you whispered. "Be a good boy, Harrison. Go to the police station. Turn yourself in. Tell them you're confused. If you do that, I'll let Nash have a drink. If you don't, well, dehydration is a painful way to go." The line went dead. I stared at the cheap plastic phone in my hand. She was threatening to torture him. She was using his basic survival as a bargaining chip. Sal looked at me, his face grim. "What did she say?" "She said we better hurry," I said, tossing the phone onto the dashboard. I put the van in gear. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The fear was gone. The grief was gone. Only the mission was left. "We're going to Sunnyvale," I told Sal, "and we're going to burn them down if we have to." I drove toward the west side of the city, the rental van's engine whining as I pushed it to the limit. I had sold my watch. I had lost my home. I was a fugitive. But I was Harrison Banks, and tonight I was getting my son back. Sunnyvale Care Center loomed in the darkness like a concrete tomb sitting on the edge of a forgotten industrial park on the west side of the city. It was 2 a.m., and the only light came from a flickering yellow bulb over the loading dock. I cut the engine of the rental van a block away, letting the vehicle roll into the shadows of an abandoned warehouse. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the highway and the ragged breathing of two men about to commit a felony. Sal pulled his ski mask down over his face. I did the same. The fabric scratched against my skin, smelling like an army surplus store, but it helped hide the fear trying to claw its way up my throat. I grabbed the bolt cutters from the back. Sal took the crowbar and a small electronic device he'd wired together in the van. We moved low and fast across the cracked asphalt. The perimeter fence was chain link topped with razor wire that looked rusted and mean. I found a spot where the shadows were deepest, right behind a dumpster that reeked of rotting food and medical waste. I fit the jaws of the cutters around the links. The metal groaned and snapped. It took me 3 minutes to cut a hole big enough for us to crawl through. My arthritis screamed with every squeeze of the handles, but I pushed the pain down. Pain was just a signal. My son was the mission. We slipped through the gap. We were on the grounds now. Sal pointed to the camera mounted on the corner of the building. It was panning slowly, its red eyes scanning the parking lot. He moved under it, quick as an alley cat, and hooked his device into the junction box on the wall. He tapped a few buttons. The red light on the camera died. "Clear," Sal whispered. We approached the rear service entrance. It was a heavy steel door painted a peeling beige. I expected it to be deadbolted, but Sal wedged the crowbar into the gap and leaned his weight into it. He worked the tool with the finesse of a surgeon finding the latch. With a sharp crack, the lock gave way. We slipped inside, and the smell hit us instantly. It was a physical wall of stench, urine, sweat, stale boiled cabbage, and above it all, the sharp chemical sting of cheap industrial antiseptic that failed to mask the scent of decay. It was the smell of a place where people came to be forgotten. The hallway was dark lit by emergency exit signs that cast a sickly green glow on the linoleum floor. We moved silently, checking the rooms on the ground floor. The doors were open. Inside, I saw elderly figures huddled in beds, thin blankets pulled up to their chins. Some moaned in their sleep. Others just stared at the ceiling, waiting for an end that couldn't come fast enough. I checked the clipboards hanging outside the doors. Smith, Johnson, Kowalski. No Nash. My heart started hammering against my ribs. We swept the entire first floor. Nothing. We moved to the second floor, taking the stairs 2 at a time. It was the same story. Row after row of forgotten souls, but not my son. Where is he? I hissed at Sal. We were running out of time. Shift change would be in an hour. Sal stopped by a nurse's station that was currently empty. He tapped at the computer terminal, his fingers flying across the keys. No record of a Nash, Sal whispered, his eyes scanning the screen. No patient 304 listed in the general population. He has to be here, I said. The money trail ends here. Sal looked around. Then he pointed to a door at the far end of the hall. It was different from the others. It was solid metal, no window, painted in ominous dark gray. A sign on the front read, "Storage. Authorized personnel only." Why does a storage closet need a keypad lock? Sal asked. We moved toward it. The keypad was a high-end biometric lock. Sal couldn't hack this one. Use the crowbar, I said. Sal wedged the bar into the frame. This door was reinforced. It took both of us pushing and prying, the metal shrieking in protest. With a final deafening pop, the frame splintered and the door swung inward. Behind it wasn't a closet. It was a staircase descending into pitch black. The smell drifting up from below was different. It was cold, damp. It smelled like dirt and harsh medicine. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing concrete steps. We went down. At the bottom of the stairs was another hallway. This one wasn't like the floors above. The walls were bare cinder block. There were no windows. The air was freezing, the kind of cold that seeps into your joints. There were 5 doors, heavy steel doors with small sliding viewing panels. They looked like prison cells. I went to the first door and slid the panel open. Empty. Just a bare mattress. I went to the second. A naked old man curled in a fetal position on the floor. I went to the third door. I slid the panel and shined my light inside. The beam landed on a bed in the center of the room. There was a figure strapped to it. I fumbled with the latch. It wasn't locked. I threw the door open and rushed in. Nash, I whispered. The figure on the bed didn't move. I stepped closer, the flashlight trembling in my hand. I almost didn't recognize him. My son had been a linebacker on his high school football team. He was 6'2", 200 pounds of pure muscle with an easy smile. The man on the bed was a skeleton. His cheekbones jutted sharply from his face. His skin was stretched and gray like parchment. His eyes were sunken into deep, dark sockets. He must have lost at least 50 pounds. He looked like a famine victim. Nash. I managed to choke out, reaching for his hand. His wrists were bound to the bed rails with thick leather straps. The leather had rubbed his skin raw. But the worst part wasn't the restraints. It was the tube. A clear plastic feeding tube was taped to his nose, running down his throat. A bag of yellowish fluid hung from an IV pole, dripping slowly. Drip, drip, drip. I touched his face. His skin was freezing. Nash, son, it's dead. I'm here. Wake up. His eyelids fluttered. They opened slowly. I looked into his eyes, expecting to see relief, fear, anything, but there was nothing. His pupils were blown wide black holes, swallowing the iris. He looked right at me, but he didn't see me. He was staring right through me, up at the ceiling, into a world I couldn't reach. He was breathing. His heart was beating, but Nash Banks wasn't there. They had chemically lobotomized him. They had pumped him so full of sedatives and antipsychotics that his frontal lobe just shut down, turning a brilliant software engineer into a breathing slab of meat. I felt a scream building in my chest, a sound of pure agony, but I swallowed it. I couldn't break down. I had to get him out. Sal, help me with the straps, I ordered, my voice sounding like crushed rocks. Sal was standing in the doorway, staring at Nash in horror. He looked like he was going to throw up. Sal, I barked. He snapped out of it and rushed to the other side of the bed. He pulled a knife from his boot and started sawing at the leather strap on Nash's left wrist. I worked on the right. The leather was thick, tough, dead. The sound was so faint, I thought I imagined it. I froze looking at Nash's face. His lips were moving slightly, a tiny, dry rasp. Dad, run. He was in there, buried beneath layers of chemical fog. My son was still in there. And his first instinct, even in this hell, was to protect me. I'm not going anywhere without you. I promised, cutting through the last of the leather. We freed his arms. I reached for the feeding tube. I knew it would hurt him, but we couldn't drag the ivy pole with us. I'm sorry, son, I whispered. I pulled the tube. Nash gagged his body, convulsing weakly, but he didn't scream. He didn't have the strength. We have to carry him, I told Sal. You take his shoulders, I'll grab his legs. We lifted him. He felt terrifyingly light, like a bag of dry leaves. We turned toward the door, and then the world went white. Banks of industrial fluorescent lights on the ceiling that had been dark a second ago snapped on with a deafening buzz. The sudden glare blinded me. I squinted, trying to adjust. A figure was standing in the doorway, blocking our exit. It was the man from the luxury SUV, the head nurse. He wasn't wearing scrubs now. He was wearing a tailored suit that looked entirely out of place in this dungeon. He held a walkie-talkie in one hand. Behind him stood two men who were definitely not nurses. They were built like refrigerators. They wore tactical vests and held black batons that crackled with blue arcs of electricity. The head nurse smiled. It was a cold, predatory smirk that didn't reach his dead eyes. He looked at me, then at Sal, and finally at the broken form of my son in our arms. He didn't look surprised. He looked entertained. "Harrison Banks," he said in his smooth, cultured voice. "You are a persistent old man. Monica told me you were annoying, but she didn't say you were a burglar." "Get out of my way," I growled, tightening my grip on Nash's legs. "Or what? You'll hit me with your cane. You've broken into a private medical facility. You've assaulted my property. And you are attempting to kidnap a patient who is under strict quarantine for his own protection." He stepped into the room at the two guards flanking him. The electricity from the stun batons hummed furiously in the tight space. "Put him back on the bed, Harrison," the nurse said. "If you do, I might let you walk out of here with just a few broken ribs. If you don't, well, we have 2 empty cells right next door." I looked at Sal. He was terrified, but he hadn't let go of Nash. He looked back at me, waiting for the call. The nurse checked his watch. "Monica's on her way," he said. "Care to say hello? Welcome to the family reunion." He nodded to the guards. "Take them." The guards stepped forward, raising their batons. The blue light reflected in Nash's vacant eyes. I shifted my weight, preparing to use the only weapon I had left, my own body. I wasn't a foreman anymore. I was a father. And if I was going to die in this basement, I was taking as many of them with me as I could. The two guards moved with the synchronized precision of trained guerrillas, splitting up to flank us. The one on the left, a man with a neck thick as a tree stump, lunged toward Sal. The other, the one with the buzzing stun baton, came straight for me. He looked at my gray hair and thin frame and saw an easy mark. He saw a victim. He didn't see a man who had spent 40 years breaking up dogfights between men twice his size. I didn't step back. I stepped into his swing. It's counterintuitive. Your brain screams at you to pull away from the weapon. But on the docks, you learn that backing up just gets you cornered. You have to close the distance. You have to get inside the arc of the swing. I stepped in and drove my forearm against his wrist, blocking the baton inches from my face. The electricity crackled, the sharp, terrifying smell of ozone singeing the hair on my arm. He was strong, much stronger than me, but he was arrogant. He tried to shove me back with brute force. I didn't resist his push. Instead, I dropped. I went down to one knee, letting his own momentum carry him over me. As he stumbled forward, I drove my fist up into his groin with every ounce of old man strength I had left. He let out a high-pitched hiss and doubled over. I didn't wait. I grabbed the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall next to the door. It was heavy, a solid cylinder of red steel. I didn't use it to spray. I swung it like a sledgehammer. The base of the extinguisher connected with the side of his knee. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage and bone. He went down screaming, the baton clattering across the concrete floor. Across the room, Sal was fighting for his life. The tree trunk guard had him pinned against the wall, raining heavy blows down on him. Sal was young and scrappy, but he was outmatched. I saw blood spraying from Sal's nose. I pulled the pin on the extinguisher. "Hey!" I roared. The big guard turned his head. I squeezed the handle. A blast of white chemical powder erupted into the room and blinding, choking fog that filled the tight space instantly. The guard coughed blindly, swatting at his eyes. Sal didn't hesitate. He kicked the man in the shin and scrambled away, gasping for air. I dropped the extinguisher and reached into my coat pocket. My hand found the can of pepper spray I had almost used on Sal just 2 days ago. I moved through the white fog, guided by the sound of the guard's coughing. I saw his silhouette, raised the can, and emptied it into his face. He howled a sound of pure agony and dropped to his knees, clawing at his eyes. We had won. For a second, we had won. But I had forgotten about the head nurse. I turned back toward the bed, toward Nash. The nurse was there. He wasn't fighting. He was standing calmly by the medical cart. He was holding a small silver tray. On it was a syringe. He looked at me in his immaculate suit amidst the chaos and smiled. Then he kicked me. It was a precise martial arts style kick, driving the pointed toe of his expensive dress shoe directly into my ribs. I felt the snap. 2, maybe 3 ribs gave way. The pain was blinding, a hot spear of fire that drove the breath from my lungs. I collapsed to the floor, gasping, my vision swimming with black spots. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The pain was too much. The nurse stepped over me. He walked to the bed where Nash lay, his eyes wide and terrified, watching violence he couldn't understand. "Time for your medicine, Mr. Banks," the nurse purred, uncapping the needle. "No!" I wheezed. I crawled across the floor. Every inch was torture. My broken ribs ground against each other. I couldn't stand, but I could crawl. I grabbed the nurse's ankle. He tried to shake me off, but I held on with a grip that had hauled crates and pulled ropes for 4 decades. I yanked hard. He stumbled. The syringe flew from his hand and skidded across the floor. He kicked me again, this time in the shoulder, but I didn't let go. "Sal!" I yelled, my voice a ragged croak. "Sal!" He emerged from the chemical fog, his face a mask of blood. He tackled the nurse, slamming him into the wall. They went down in a tangle of limbs. I was alone with Nash. I pulled myself up using the bed frame, my breath coming in shallow, agonizing gasps. I looked at my son. The tube was still in his nose. The bag of yellow fluid was still dripping. Drip, drip, drip. That fluid was the chain that bound him. It was the liquid padlock on his mind. I reached out with trembling hands. "It's okay, son," I whispered. "Dad's here." I grabbed the tube. I pulled. It came out with a wet, sucking sound. Nash gagged, his body arching off the mattress in a reflex spasm. I threw the tube to the floor. Nash slumped back down. His chest heaved. He blinked, and for a second the chemical fog in his eyes seemed to part. He looked at me. He really looked at me. "Dad?" he rasped. It was barely a whisper, dry as dust. "I'm here," I said, tears mixing with the sweat on my face. "Run," he said. He was dying. He was drugged. He was tortured, and he was telling me to save myself. "I'm not leaving you," I said. "Get away from him!" A voice shrieked from the doorway. I spun around, bracing for another guard, for a gun, for anything. It was Monica. She was standing in the doorway, framed by the darkness of the hall. She looked perfect. Her hair was styled, her makeup flawless, her designer coat draped over her shoulders. She looked like she had just come from a charity gala, not a dungeon. But she wasn't holding a gun. She was holding her phone, and the ring light case was glowing. She held the phone high, the camera facing her, but angled to capture me, the unconscious guards, and the chaos of the room. "Please, somebody help me," she cried into the phone, her face twisting into a mask of terrified victimhood. "I'm live right now. My father-in-law has lost his mind. He hired gang members. They broke into the hospital. They're attacking the staff." She panned the camera toward the nurse groaning on the floor and the guards writhing from the pepper spray. "Look at this," she cried, fake tears instantly welling up in her eyes. "He's violent. He has dementia. He's trying to kill my husband. He ripped out Nash's life support. Look," she pointed the camera at the tube on the floor. "Oh my God, he's killing him. Please send the police." "Send help." It was a masterclass in manipulation. To the thousands of people watching that stream, I wasn't a rescuer. I was a deranged old man in a ski mask, standing over a helpless patient in a trashed room. Sal looked at me, panic in his eyes. "We gotta go, Harrison. We gotta go now." I looked at Monica. She was smiling from behind the phone, a tiny, triumphant smirk. She knew she had won the narrative. She controlled the story. But she didn't control the facts. I didn't run. I didn't attack her. I reached into my back pocket. When we first entered the room before the lights came on, I had brushed against a metal clipboard hanging at the foot of Nash's bed. I had shoved it into my pocket without thinking. Now I pulled it out. It was Nash's medical chart. The real chart, not the one they showed state inspectors. I flipped it open. My eyes scanned the lines of medical shorthand. I saw the dosages. I saw the chemical names. I took a step toward Monica. She flinched, expecting a strike, wanting a hit so she could catch it on video. I didn't touch her. I looked directly into the lens of her phone. I watched the comments scrolling by, the hearts, the shocked emojis. "Is this treatment?" My voice roared, echoing in the small room. I held the clipboard up to the camera. My fingers stabbed at the paper. "Haloperidol doses 20 milligrams every 4 hours. That's 10 times the maximum geriatric dose. That's not for anxiety. That's a chemical lobotomy." Monica tried to pull the phone away, but I stepped closer, relentless. "Look at the blood tests," I shouted, flipping the page. "Arsenic levels. Why does my son have arsenic in his blood, Monica? Is that part of the therapy? Is that part of the Dubai treatment plan?" The little smirk vanished from her face. She saw the comments on her screen shifting. People were pausing that they were reading the chart. "He's crazy," Monica screamed over me. "Those are fake. He brought those fake papers with him." I grabbed the vial from the nightstand, the one that had been feeding the IV bag. I held it up to the light. It had a label. Sunnyvale Compounding Pharmacy, property of M. Banks. "It has your name on it, Monica," I yelled. "Since when do you prescribe antipsychotics? You're a real estate agent." The air in the room was electric. Sal was staring at me, stunned. The nurse was trying to crawl away. Monica was backing up, her hands shaking, the camera shaking. And then we heard it, the wail of sirens. Close, very close. They were right outside the building. Blue and red lights began to flash against the high basement windows, cutting through the gloom. Monica lowered the phone. She looked at me and then she smiled. It was the smile of a predator who knows the trap has sprung. "I called them 10 minutes ago, Harrison," she whispered, her voice low so the stream wouldn't pick it up. "I told them there was an armed intruder with a history of mental illness holding hostages. They aren't here to arrest me. They're here to shoot you." She turned back to the phone, her face instantly crumbling back into fear. "They're here, thank God. Officer's down here. He has a weapon. He's going to kill us." She dropped the phone like she was panicking, leaving it face up on the floor, still broadcasting. Sal looked at me. There was no way out. The stairs were the only exit. "Harrison," Sal said, his voice quiet. "It was an honor." I looked at my son. He was watching me. His eyes were clearer now. He understood. I put my hand on his forehead. "It's not over," I told him. "Don't give up." Heavy boots thundered down the stairs. Voices shouted orders. "Police, drop to the ground." I raised my hands. I didn't drop to my knees. I stood tall. I was Harrison Banks. I had exposed the truth. The world had seen the medical chart. The seed of doubt was planted. Monica thought the cops were her salvation. She thought handcuffs were my end. But as the SWAT team flooded the room with raised rifles and blinding lights sweeping over us, I looked at Monica one last time. "You better hope they keep me in jail forever," I said, calm in the center of the storm. "Because the second I get out, I'm coming for everything." A police officer slammed me against the wall. My broken ribs screamed, the cuffs bit into my wrists, but I smiled. Because I knew something Monica didn't. I knew the stream wasn't over. And I knew that while I was going to a cell, the truth was already breaking free. The holding cell at the 18th precinct in Philadelphia smelled of industrial disinfectant and old sweat, a scent that clung to the back of your throat and refused to leave. I sat on the metal bench, my back screaming in protest where the ribs had snapped. Every breath was a shallow, jagged intake of air that felt like inhaling broken glass. My wrists were raw from the cuffs, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow, crushing weight in my chest. I had failed. I had broken into that dungeon. I had fought through the fog of chemicals and lies. I had held my son's hand. And in the end, the system had done exactly what Monica knew it would do. It protected the pretty face with the convincing story and threw the old man in a cage. Sal was in the cell next to mine. I could hear him pacing the rhythmic slap of his sneakers on the concrete. He hadn't said a word since we were booked. I imagined he was regretting the day he ever met a Banks. I couldn't blame him. I dragged him into a war he didn't start, and now he was looking at heavy charges that would violate his parole and send him back to prison for a long time. I rested my head against the cinder block wall. The cold seeped into my skull. I closed my eyes and saw Nash's face. Not the vibrant young man building computers in his bedroom, but the empty shell in the basement, wide-eyed and hollow, whispering for me to run. I should have stayed. I should have made them shoot me right there holding his hand. At least then I wouldn't be sitting here waiting for the news that my son was dead. Time loses its meaning in a holding cell. It could have been an hour or a day when I heard the heavy clack of the security door swinging open. I didn't look up. I assumed it was a public defender I couldn't afford or a detective coming to tell me I was being charged with domestic terrorism. "Hello, Harrison." The voice was smooth, melodic, and laced with a venom I now recognized instantly. I opened my eyes. Monica was standing on the other side of the bars. She wasn't wearing the disheveled coat from the live stream anymore. She had changed into a crisp business suit, her hair pulled back in a severe mourning ponytail. She looked the picture of a concerned wife dealing with a family tragedy. The officer standing a few feet behind her looked at her with sympathy. He probably thought she was a saint for visiting the man who attacked her. I stood up. It took effort. My knees popped and my ribs flared, but I wasn't going to sit while she looked down at me. I walked over to the bars. "You have 5 minutes, Mrs. Banks," the officer said respectfully. "Thank you, officer," she said, giving him a brave, teary smile. When the officer stepped back to give us privacy, the smile vanished. Her face settled into a mask of cold indifference. She stepped closer to the bars, the scent of her expensive perfume drifting into the stale air of the cell. It made me nauseous. "You look terrible, Harrison," she whispered. "Jail doesn't suit you." "Where is he?" I rasped. "He's at University Hospital," she said. "In the ICU. The doctors are very concerned. The trauma of the attempted kidnapping caused a severe reaction. His vitals are unstable." "You poisoned him," I said, my voice low and steady. "I saw the chart. Arsenic, haloperidol." She laughed. It was a dry, soundless exhale. "Nobody saw that chart, Harrison. The police confiscated everything as evidence of your delusions. By the time it gets to a lab, if it ever does, those samples will be long gone, contaminated, lost in the system. And the chart? I burned it before the ambulance arrived." She gripped the bars, her manicured nails digging into the paint. "You played a good hand, old man. I'll give you that. The live stream was a nice touch. But you forgot who owns the board." "I'm his wife. I have his power of attorney. I'm his guardian. The state recognizes me, not you." She leaned closer, her face inches from mine. "The doctors say his quality of life is non-existent. They say the brain damage from the lack of oxygen during your little rescue mission is irreversible. Next week, after the press fervor dies down, I'm going to make the difficult, heartbreaking decision to pull the plug. It's what Nash would have wanted. He wouldn't want to live as a vegetable." My hands balled into fists at my sides. If there weren't bars between us, I would have ended it right there. "You're going to kill him," I said. "I'm going to let him go," she corrected. "And when he's gone, the $5 million life insurance policy, plus the house, plus the remaining assets, it all comes to me. And you'll rot in a state penitentiary for assault, kidnapping, and breaking and entering. You'll die in here, Harrison, and Nash will die in a sterile room thinking his father abandoned him." She took a step back, smoothing her skirt. "Goodbye, Dad. Try not to cause any more trouble. It's embarrassing for the family." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the floor. I watched her go. I slammed my hand against the bars, a scream tearing from my throat that echoed through the cell block. It was a sound of pure, absolute despair. I sank to the floor. I was beaten. She had the law, the money, and the time. I had nothing. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the concrete floor, waiting for the end. Then the door opened again. I didn't move. I didn't care who it was. "Release him." The voice wasn't Monica's. It was sharp, authoritative, and it cut through the ambient noise of the police station like a razor blade. It was a woman's voice, but it didn't sound like a grieving wife. It sounded like a chainsaw in a suit. I looked up. Standing at the sergeant's desk was a woman I had never seen before. She was tall, wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than my truck. Her hair was cut in a sharp, asymmetrical bob, and she carried a leather briefcase that looked like it held nuclear launch codes. She wasn't pleading with the sergeant. She was giving him orders. "Ma'am, you can't just storm in here," the sergeant stammered, standing up. "This man is being processed for multiple felonies." "I'm not storming in," she said, slamming a thick file onto the desk. "I'm representing my client, and you are currently violating his civil rights, holding him on bogus charges and acting as an accessory to an ongoing kidnapping." "Who are you?" the sergeant asked, his hand drifting toward his radio. "I'm Sarah Jenkins," she said, "and I represent Harrison Banks." I stood up confused. I didn't know any Sarah Jenkins. I didn't have money for a public defender, let alone a shark like this. "I didn't hire her," I yelled, my voice raspy. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were dark and intelligent, assessing me in a fraction of a second. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with respect. "No, Mr. Banks, you didn't," she said. She walked over to the cell, ignoring the sergeant's protests. She stood where Monica had stood just minutes ago, but the energy was different. It wasn't suffocating, it was electrifying. "I wasn't hired by you, Harrison," she said quietly. "I was hired by Nash." "Nash?" I blinked. "But he's been missing for 2 years." Sarah nodded, opened her briefcase, and pulled out a tablet. She tapped the screen and held it up. It was a video. Nash. He looked healthy, vibrant. The son I remembered. He was sitting in his home office, looking over his shoulder nervously. "If you're watching this," Nash said in the video, his voice trembling slightly, "it means I messed up. It means I didn't get out in time." My breath caught in my throat. "My name is Nash Banks," the video continued. "I'm a senior systems architect for Cyberdyne. I build security protocols for banks. I know when things don't add up. 6 months ago, I found a second phone in Monica's car. I found the texts. I found the search history for heavy sedatives and long-term care facilities." Nash leaned into the camera. "I'm scared. She's switching things up. She's putting things in my food. I feel foggy. I'm setting up a dead man's switch. This video, along with every email, every financial record, and a keylogger report of her computer activity is encrypted on a server. If I don't log in with my biometric key every 30 days, the package automatically decrypts and sends itself to the offices of Sarah Jenkins, the toughest litigator in the state." The video cut to black. Sarah lowered the tablet. "The email hit my inbox 23 months ago," she said. "Then why?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why did you wait? Why did you let him rot in there for 2 years?" "Because I couldn't find him," Sarah said, her voice hard with frustration. The data dump proved she was planning something, but it didn't prove where he was. Monica had the perfect alibi. Dubai. She had power of attorney. She had the legal system wrapped around her finger. Every time I tried to file a motion, she produced a fake video call or forged document. Without a body, without proof of life or death, my hands were tied. I've been fighting a ghost war for 2 years, Harrison. I've had investigators tracking her, but she was careful. She looked at me with a fierce light in her eyes. "Until last night. Until you broke in. Until you live-streamed your face to the world. That was the piece I was missing. That was probable cause. You proved he was in the jurisdiction. You proved he was being held against his will. You triggered the contingency." She turned back to the sergeant, who was looking very pale now. "This file contains the metadata from the live stream proving the location was Sunnyvale. It contains toxicology reports from Nash's own self-testing kits that he hid before he was taken. And it contains a durable power of attorney signed, notarized, and filed with my firm 2 years ago, stating that in the event of his incapacitation, all decision-making power bypasses his wife and goes directly to his father, Harrison Banks." The sergeant looked at the file, then at me, then at Sarah. "Are you telling me," he stammered. "I'm telling you that you have the wrong person in this cell," Sarah said, her voice ringing with the finality of a gavel strike. "You are holding the whistleblower, The kidnapper is currently at University Hospital, probably trying to murder the victim to destroy the evidence. She checked her watch. You have 5 minutes to release my client and dispatch a unit to the hospital to secure Nash Banks. If you don't, I will have this entire precinct named in a federal negligence lawsuit so massive, your grandchildren will still be paying it off. The sergeant didn't wait 5 minutes. He grabbed the keys. As the cell door swung open, I felt the pain in my ribs fade into the background. Monica thought she was playing chess. She thought she was thinking 3 moves ahead. But my son was an architect. He didn't just play the game, he built the board, and he had laid a trap from beyond the grave of his own life that was about to snap shut. I stepped out of the cell. Sarah Jenkins held out her hand. Let's go get him, Harrison. I shook her hand. It was firm and cold. Let's go, I said. We walked out of the precinct into the morning light. The war wasn't over, but for the first time I had a weapon and I fully intended to use it. The ride to University Hospital was a blur of siren lights and the sharp metallic taste of adrenaline. I sat in the back of Sarah Jenkins' luxury sedan, clutching a leather folder to my chest like it held the crown jewels. In a way, it held something much more valuable. It held my son's life. Sarah drove with the ruthless efficiency of a woman who had never lost a traffic dispute, weaving through the morning Philadelphia traffic while speaking rapidly into her hands-free system, coordinating with the hospital's legal board and the district attorney. Inside the folder was the document Nash had hidden in the ether 2 years ago. A durable power of attorney. Not the standard form you download off the internet, but a fortress of legalese designed for a specific purpose. It declared in clear, undeniable terms that the moment Nash Banks was deemed incapacitated, his wife, Monica Banks, would be stripped of all authority. No medical decisions, no financial access, no visitation rights. Every ounce of power transferred immediately and irrevocably to me, Harrison Banks. My son had built a trapdoor under his own marriage, knowing that one day he might fall through it. We screeched to a halt at the emergency entrance. 2 police cruisers were already there, their lights flashing silently against the gray building. The officers were waiting for us. We have to hurry, Sarah said, stepping out of the car and smoothing her suit jacket. My contact inside says she paged the attending physician 10 minutes ago. She's claiming imminent organ failure. She's trying to expedite the end-of-life protocol. My broken ribs screamed as I forced myself out of the car. But I pushed the pain down into the furnace of my rage. She was trying to finish the job. She wanted him dead before the toxicology reports could come back, before Nash could wake up and point a finger. We moved through the hospital corridors like a storm front. Sarah led the way, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. I limped behind them, my boots squeaking on the polished linoleum. Nurses and orderlies scattered as we approached the intensive care unit. We reached the double doors of the ICU. A security guard tried to step in front of us. Family only, he started to say. Police matter, Sarah barked. Without breaking stride, she shoved the court order into his chest and pushed through the doors. We rounded the corner to Nash's spot, and there she was. Monica was standing by the bed, her hand resting on the shoulder of a tired-looking doctor holding a clipboard. She was crying a soft, tragic performance for the benefit of the medical staff. Nash lay in the bed, pale and motionless. The machines beeped a slow, rhythmic cadence around him. He looked small. He looked like the little boy I used to tuck into bed, but broken. I just want his suffering to end, Monica sobbed to the doctor. He wouldn't want to live like this. Please, doctor, where do I sign? The doctor clicked a pen and held out the clipboard. Don't sign that, I roared. The sound tore through the quiet unit. Monica spun around, her eyes widening in genuine shock. She expected me to be in a holding cell waiting for a public defender. She didn't expect me to be standing 10 feet away, flanked by the law and the most dangerous lawyer in the city. Harrison, she breathed, her mask slipping for a second. How? Step away from my son, I said, walking toward her. Every step was agony, but I didn't stop until I was standing right in her face. Get him out of here, Monica shrieked, turning to the doctor. This is the man who attacked us. He's dangerous. He's delusional. I have a restraining order. You don't have anything, Sarah Jenkins said, stepping into the light. She slapped the durable power of attorney onto the medical cart next to the bed. Who are you? Monica hissed. I'm the person who's going to put you in prison. Sarah replied calmly. She turned to the doctor. Doctor, I am Sarah Jenkins, counsel from Mr. Harrison Banks. This document, signed by your patient 2 years ago, designates my client as the sole medical proxy. Any signature from this woman is null and void. And if you let her make one more decision regarding this patient, I will have your medical license revoked before lunch. The doctor looked at the document, then at Monica. He capped his pen and took a step back. This looks legal, he stammered. Mrs. Banks, is this true? It's a forgery. Monica screamed, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. It's fake. He printed that off the internet. I'm his wife. I'm the only family he has. I'm his wife. She used that phrase like a shield, like a weapon. I stepped closer, invading her space, forcing her to look into the eyes of the man she had tried to destroy. You're not his wife, I said, my voice low and trembling with the weight of the truth I was about to unleash. You're a murder suspect. Murder. She left a nervous, jagged sound. He's not dead, Harrison. He's dying because you've been feeding him arsenic for 3 years. A deep voice interrupted. We all turned. A man in a white lab coat had walked into the room. He was holding a tablet. I didn't know him, but Sarah nodded at him. He was the independent toxicologist she had demanded be brought in the moment the digital files were decrypted. We ran the stat panel you requested, Attorney Jenkins. The toxicologist said, ignoring Monica and speaking directly to Sarah. We didn't just find the asylum sedatives. We found heavy metal accumulation in his hair follicles and nail beds. Chronic arsenic poisoning. The levels are consistent with slow, low-dose ingestion over a period of at least 30 months. The room fell dead silent. The only sound was the beeping of Nash's heart monitor. 30 months. Before the kidnapping, before Dubai, before everything. She hadn't just locked him away. She had been slowly killing him while they were still living in the house I bought, eating dinner at the table where I sat. Monica's face went white. Not the pale of fear, but the gray of a corpse. She looked at the doctor, then at the police officers whose hands were now resting on their holsters. That's impossible, she whispered. He must have been exposed to something at work, industrial chemicals. Stop, Sarah said. Just stop. We have the search history, Monica. We have the credit card receipts for the rat poison. We have the emails you sent to the asylum, instructing them to maintain the regimen. It's over. Monica looked around the room, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. She looked at Nash lying helpless in the bed. She looked at me. And then she broke. You foolish old man. She spat, her face twisting into a sneer of pure hatred. You should have just died. You and your stupid son. He was weak. He was pathetic. He didn't deserve that money. He didn't deserve any of it. Ma'am, put your hands behind your back, one of the officers said, stepping forward with handcuffs. Monica looked at the officer, then at the open door of the ICU pod. She didn't surrender. She threw the metal tray of surgical instruments into the officer's face. The tray clattered loudly, scalpels and scissors scattering across the floor. The officer flinched, throwing his hands up. In that split second of distraction, Monica ran. She bolted for the door, shoving the doctor aside. She was fast, fueled by the desperate energy of someone who knows their life is over. She sprinted down the hall, her heels clicking rapidly on the tiles. She's running! The officer yelled, recovering and giving chase. Sarah started to move, but I grabbed her arm. Let her go, I said. Sarah looked at me confused. Harrison, she's getting away. I looked at the doorway where Monica had disappeared. I felt no urge to chase her. I felt no need to tackle her. She's not going anywhere, I said, my voice calm. She just doesn't know it yet. I turned back to the bed. I looked at my son. The machines were still beeping. He was still fighting. And for the first time in 2 years, the monster that had been standing over him, blocking out the light, was gone. I reached out and took Nash's hand. It was warm. She can run to the parking lot. I told Sarah, keeping my eyes on my son. She can run to the airport, but she has no money. She has no cards. Her car has been flagged. Her passport is in a safe she can't open. She's a ghost. Sarah, let her run. Let her feel what it's like to be hunted. Let her feel what it's like to have the world closing in on her. Sarah looked at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. She nodded slowly. You're right, she said. The net is already pulled tight. Outside, I could hear shouting, the sound of security radios crackling. Monica was causing a scene. She was fighting. She was delaying the inevitable. But in this room, there was peace. I dragged the chair over to the bed. I sat down, my ribs aching, my body exhausted, but my spirit whole. "I'm here, Nash," I whispered. "She's gone. You're safe." I watched the rhythm of his chest rising and falling. The poison was in his blood, yes. But the antidote was sitting right here. I was the antidote. And as I sat there listening to the distant sirens coming for the woman who tried to kill my family, I knew the real fight, the fight to bring my son back from the dark, was just beginning. But for the first time, I knew we were going to win. As I sat by my son's bedside listening to the rhythmic beep of the monitors confirming he was still alive, Monica was running against a clock that had already run out. I didn't need to be there to see it. I knew the machinery of the trap Nash had built. I knew every gear, every spring, and every devastating lever that Sarah Jenkins and I had pulled the moment the toxicology report came back positive. Monica thought she was fleeing to safety, running back to the fortress of wealth she had stolen. She didn't realize she was running into a cage. She peeled out of the hospital parking lot in the black Range Rover tires, screaming against the asphalt. She drove with the reckless abandon of a woman who believes speed can outrun consequences. She was heading to the mansion, to the safe hidden behind the painting in the master bedroom, where she kept the emergency cash and the fake passports she had probably prepared years ago. She thought if she could just get to that safe, she could vanish. She could go to Mexico or the Cayman Islands and live off the interest of the millions she had siphoned from us. It started to rain, a cold, hard Philadelphia rain that turned the highway into a slick sheet of gray. Monica pushed the Rover to 80 miles an hour, weaving through traffic, checking her rear-view mirror for flashing lights. But there were no cop cars chasing her. We didn't need to chase her. We had something better than sirens. We had the internet. She came screeching into the estate's driveway 20 minutes later. The house loomed dark and imposing against the storm, the brick facade wet and slick. It looked like a sanctuary. It looked like her property. She jumped out of the car, not bothering to shut the door, and sprinted up the stone steps to the massive oak front door. Her heels clicked frantically on the wet stone. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She opened the smart home app to unlock the deadbolt. She tapped the unlock icon. Access denied. She frowned, wiping the rain from her screen. She tapped it again, harder. User authorization revoked. Admin access only. She stared at the phone. Admin. She was the admin. She had set up the system. She tried the physical keypad on the door frame. She punched in her code. 1, 2, 3, 4. The light on the lock didn't turn green. It flashed red. A harsh, angry beep echoed in the quiet entryway. System locked down. A robotic voice announced from the speaker. Security alert active. She pounded her fist on the door. "Open up!" she screamed at the wood. "Open the door!" But the door was solid oak reinforced with steel. It didn't budge. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand. She didn't know about the asset clawback clause. 2 years ago, when Nash set up the dead man's switch, he didn't just back up his files. He restructured the deed to the house, transferring the title to a blind revocable trust. The terms were specific and brutal. The trust stipulated that the property was for the benefit of Nash Banks and his lawful, faithful spouse. But there was a trigger clause in the event of proven infidelity, incapacitation caused by the beneficiary, or criminal malfeasance. The spouse's beneficiary status was immediately terminated, and full control of the trust assets reverted to the secondary trustee, me Harrison Banks. The moment Sarah Jenkins submitted the toxicology report and the police report to the firm holding the trust, the clause triggered. I was the owner now. And 10 minutes ago, while sitting in the ICU, I had used my phone to change the security codes. Monica ran around the side of the house toward the back door, sleeping in the wet grass, ruining her designer shoes. She tried the back keypad. Red light. She tried the locked windows. She picked up a landscaping rock, intending to smash the glass of the patio door. But as she raised the rock, a floodlight blinded her. The perimeter security system had detected an intruder. A siren began to wail, a piercing, deafening sound that echoed throughout the neighborhood. Intruder alert. Police dispatch notified. She dropped the rock. She couldn't be here when the cops arrived. She needed money. She needed to escape. She ran back to the Range Rover. She was soaked, now her hair plastered to her skull, her expensive suit ruined. She jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, locking out the siren. She grabbed her phone again, opening her banking app. She needed to wire the funds from the joint savings account to her offshore crypto wallet before the freeze hit. She logged in with facial recognition. The app loaded. Total balance. It blinked. She refreshed the page. Total balance, $0. A notification banner scrolled across the top of the screen. Account garnished by court order 4990B. Contact branch for details. No, she whispered. No. She checked checking. 0. She checked the investment portfolio. Locked. She checked the credit cards. Account suspended. I hadn't just frozen the accounts. Sarah Jenkins had invoked the creditor's right of set-off, arguing that the money in those accounts was proven to be proceeds from fraud committed against Nash. The bank was obligated to return it to the victim's estate. The money wasn't just frozen, it was gone. Repatriated to a secure holding account under my control. She screamed the sound of pure frustration and threw the phone against the passenger seat. She still had the Range Rover. It was a $100,000 car. She could sell it. She could drive it to a chop shop in Jersey. She stomped on the brake and threw the car into reverse. The engine revved, but the car didn't move. She frowned, shifted into drive, hit the gas again. The engine roared. The RPMs spiked, but the wheels were locked. The dashboard screen flashed a message, remote immobilization active, contact dealer. The car was a lease. It was leased in Nash's name. And for 2 years, Monica had been paying the lease using Nash's money. But when I took control of the accounts an hour ago, I canceled all auto payments and then called the dealership. I told them the vehicle was in the possession of an unauthorized driver involved in a felony investigation. Modern luxury cars have GPS trackers and remote kill switches. The dealership had turned the car into a brick. It was nothing more than a 2-ton paperweight. Then she saw the flashing yellow lights in the rearview mirror. A tow truck was backing into the driveway. A large man in a reflective vest hopped out. He didn't look at her. He walked to the back of the Rover and started hooking up the chains. "Hey!" Monica yelled, jumping out of the car. "What are you doing? This is my car." "Repossession order, ma'am," the man grunted, not stopping his work. "Default on payment. Unauthorized user." "Step away from the vehicle." "You can't take it, I need it." "Step away or I call the cops," he said, winching the front of the Rover into the air. She watched as the last symbol of her stolen status was lifted off the ground. The car the head nurse had driven to her house, the car she had used to feel powerful, was being hauled away like scrap metal. The tow truck driver handed her a slip of paper, then jumped into his cab and drove off, dragging the locked Rover behind him. Monica stood in the driveway. The rain was pouring down, now a torrential deluge. She was shivering uncontrollably. The house was locked. The money was gone. The car was gone. She had no coat, no umbrella. She was standing in front of the mansion she had terrorized my son to keep, and she was totally and completely homeless. She looked down at the muddy ground. She let out a scream that tore her throat, an animal, primal sound of rage and defeat. She dropped to her knees in the mud, ruining the last clean thing she owned. But she wasn't done. She had one card left. She crawled to where her purse had fallen in the mud. She pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. She dialed a number. Her hands were shaking so badly she messed up twice. Finally, it connected. It was the head nurse. Derek. Her partner, her lover, the man who had helped her execute the whole plan. He had money. He had a stash house. He would help her. "Answer, answer, answer," she hissed. The line clicked. "Derek. Thank God," she sobbed. "Harrison took everything. He locked the house. He took the money. You have to come get me. Bring the cash." "We have to go now." There was silence on the other end. Then the sound of a siren in the background. "Derek!" "Don't ever call me again, Monica," Derek's voice said. It was tight, full of panic. "What?" "We have a plan. We are partners." "There is no plan," Derek yelled. "The cops are here. They're at the pharmacy. They found the logs. They found the unauthorized antipsychotic shipments. They know about the arsenic orders. They're breaking down my door right now." "Derek, please. I'm outside in the rain. I have nothing." "You're on your own," he screamed. "You led them right to me with that stupid live stream. Don't you get it? It's over." I heard a crash on the other end of the line. Voices shouting, "Federal agents! Hands in the air!" Then the line went dead. Monica lowered the phone. She looked at the dark screen. She looked at the dark house. She looked at the empty driveway. The cold rain soaked through her clothes, chilling her to the marrow. She was alone. Truly and completely alone. She stood up, her legs shaking. She wiped the mud from her face, smearing it with her mascara. She looked like a ghost, a specter haunting a life she used to own. She started walking, not toward the house, toward the street. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay there. But as she reached the end of the driveway, headlights washed over her, blue and red lights. 2 police cruisers turned the corner, moving slowly, silently. They weren't using their sirens. They were hunting. Monica froze. She looked toward the woods on her right. She could run. She could try to hide in the trees. But she was tired. She was cold. And she knew deep down that the game was over. The cruisers stopped. The doors opened. "Monica Banks," a voice called out through the rain. She didn't answer. She just stood there, letting the rain wash away the last of her facade. I sat in the hospital chair holding Nash's hand. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Sarah. "It's done. She's in custody. Assets secured." I looked at my son. His chest rose and fell. He was safe. The nightmare was over. I leaned back and closed my eyes, listening to the rain against the hospital window. It was a good sound. It was the sound of a storm washing the world clean. The rain had stopped by the time Monica arrived at the only place left open in the city that might trade cash for desperation. It was a 24-hour pawn shop on South Street, a place with bulletproof glass and a clerk who had seen every form of human misery Philadelphia had to offer. She stumbled inside, her designer dress ruined, her hair caked with mud, looking like a wraith from a nightmare. She slammed her left hand onto the counter. The diamond on her ring finger sparkled under the harsh fluorescent lights. It was a 3-carat solitaire, the ring Nash had given her 5 years ago when they were happy, or at least when she pretended to be. She demanded $5,000. She needed a bus ticket. She needed a hotel. She needed to vanish before the net closed. The clerk behind the glass picked up his loupe. He didn't ask questions. He just inspected the stone. He looked at it for a long time, turning it under the light. Then he set the loupe down and looked at Monica with a mixture of pity and boredom. He slid the ring back through the slot. He told her he couldn't give her $5,000. He couldn't even give her $50. He told her it was cubic zirconia. It was glass. It was fake. Monica stood there frozen. The final illusion of her life shattered right there on the scratched counter. The symbol of her marriage, the rock she had flaunted to her friends, the asset she thought was her safety net. It was just like her. It was a fake. Nash must have swapped it out years ago, or maybe he never bought the real one, knowing deep down who she was. She started to laugh. It was a high, broken sound that made the clerk reach for the silent alarm, but he didn't need to. Blue and red lights washed over the storefront. The doors burst open. Monica didn't run this time. She didn't fight. She just slid down the counter to the dirty floor, still laughing, clutching the worthless piece of glass. When they cuffed her, she didn't scream about being a victim. She didn't say a word. She was done. The charges came down like a hammer. Sarah Jenkins made sure of that. Kidnapping, aggravated assault, fraud, embezzlement, and the big one, attempted murder with special circumstances due to poisoning. The district attorney didn't offer a plea deal. They went for life without parole. They found the arsenic stash in the estate's guest house. They found the digital trail of transfers. They found everything. Monica Banks was going to spend the rest of her life in a concrete box, which was a better fate than the one she had designed for my son. I didn't go to her arraignment. I didn't care to see her face again. I had more important work to do. I sold the mansion. I sold it to a tech CEO from New York for cash. I didn't negotiate. I just wanted it gone. I wanted the memory of that place, the cold halls and the basement dungeon erased from our lives. I took the sale money, reclaimed the funds Sarah had seized from Monica's frozen accounts, and I went home. Not to an apartment, not to a hotel. I went back to the old townhome on the south side of the city where I raised Nash. I had rented it out years ago, but the tenants had just moved out. It smelled like old wood and memories. It smelled like my late wife Lena's cooking. It smelled like safety. I spent a month fixing it up. I widened the doorways. I installed a ramp on the front porch. I converted the dining room into a rehab suite with the best medical equipment money could buy. I hired nurses, but not the kind who work in the shadows. I hired the best, and I vetted every single one of them myself. 6 months later, the spring sun was shining on the red brick of my porch. The neighborhood was alive with the sound of kids playing in the street and neighbors shouting hellos from their driveways. I sat in a rocking chair next to a wheelchair. Nash was sitting there, a blanket draped over his legs. He was thin, still too thin, but his color had returned. His hair, which had fallen out from the poison and the stress, was growing back thick and dark. The chemical fog that had shrouded his mind for 2 years was lifting day by day, inch by inch. It wasn't a miracle cure. There were days when his hands shook so badly he couldn't hold a cup. There were nights when he woke up screaming, thinking he was back in the basement. His speech was slow, slurred, his brain rewiring around the damage the arsenic had done. But he was here. He was alive. I held a bowl of oatmeal. I dipped the spoon and held it up. Nash opened his mouth, his jaw working slowly. He swallowed. He looked at me, his eyes clear and brown, just like his mother's. "Good," I said softly. "One more." He took another bite. Then he gently pushed the spoon away with his hand. He took a deep breath, focusing all his energy on the muscles in his mouth and tongue. "Dad," he said. The word was thick, heavy, but distinct. "I'm listening, son." "I'm sorry," he stammered. Every syllable was a victory and a struggle. "Dubai was a lie." I set the bowl down on the small table between us. I reached out and took his hand. His grip was weak, but I could feel the steady, strong pulse. "I know," I said, smiling through the tears that always threatened to spill these days. "I know it was a lie." He looked down at his lap, shame coloring his cheeks. "I was weak," he whispered. "I let her take me." "You weren't weak," I said firmly. "You were in love. And then you were poisoned. And then you were trapped." But Nash looked at me. He raised his eyes. "You built the trap that caught her," I said. "You built the switch. You saved yourself. I just opened the door." He tried to smile. It was crooked, but it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Long ride," he managed to say. I laughed, wiping a tear from my cheek with my thumb. "Yeah, son. It was the longest ride in history, but you made it back. You're home." A black SUV pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a luxury car. It was a rugged, armored security vehicle. The driver stepped out. He was wearing a suit that fit him better than his leather jacket ever did, but the spiderweb tattoo on his neck was still there, peeking above his shirt collar. It was Sal. He walked up the steps carrying a briefcase. He didn't look like a delivery boy anymore. He looked like a man with a purpose. He looked like the head of security for Cyberdyne Banks. The company Nash was slowly rebuilding from his wheelchair. "Hey, boss," Sal said, grinning at Nash. "Hey, Sal," Nash replied, raising his hand for a fist bump. Sal turned to me. "We got the contract, Harrison," Sal said. "The bank accepted the new security protocols Nash designed last week. We are back in business." I looked at the two of them. My son, the genius who had survived hell, and Sal, the ex-con, who had found his redemption and loyalty. "Take a picture," I said. Sal looked confused. "What?" "Take a picture of us, the three of us." Sal pulled out his phone, leaning in, framing the shot. I stood behind Nash's wheelchair, my hand on his shoulder. Sal stood on the other side. "Say cheese," Sal said. Nash smiled. I smiled. Sal snapped the photo. He showed it to me. It wasn't a perfect photo. The lighting was harsh and my eyes were red. But it captured something real. It captured 3 survivors who had walked through the fire and come out the other side. I looked out at the street, at the simple life I had returned to. I thought about the millions of dollars in the trust fund, the money that would ensure Nash never had to worry about a bill again, the money that would pay for his therapy, his recovery, his future. People always say money can't buy happiness. They say it's the root of all evil. And maybe they're right. It certainly didn't buy happiness for Monica. It bought her a cage. But as I looked at my son safe on his own porch and at Sal employed and proud, I knew the truth was more complicated. Money can't buy happiness, that's true. But if you use it right, if you use it to protect the people you love, if you use it to destroy the monsters who try to hurt them, Well, it can buy justice. It can buy freedom. And it can buy a second chance. And for me, Harrison Banks, watching the sun set over the city, with my boy by my side, that was enough. That was everything. We spend our lives building fortresses to keep the world out, thinking we're safe. But sometimes the enemy is already inside, sitting at your table and smiling in your face. I learned the hard way that trust is a currency you should never spend blindly, not even on family. True loyalty isn't found in a marriage certificate or a shared last name. It's found in the people who stand by you when the lights go out and the odds are impossible. Money didn't save my son. Courage did. But money gave us the shovel to bury the past and the bricks to build a new future. Be careful who you let hold your keys, because the wrong person will lock you in a cage and call it home. If you believe justice is worth fighting for no matter the cost, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the edge. Okay.